Welcome to the local campaign. Thank you for joining us for our debate for the riding of Ottawa South in the October 19th federal election. In just a few minutes, I'm going to introduce the candidates who are here for the debate, but first I'll quickly go through the rules. Each candidate will have 1 minute to provide an opening statement to you. We'll do those in an order that was drawn at random just a few minutes ago. And then we'll move into a series of debates about the important topics in Ottawa South, throughout the National Capital Region, and across Canada. In each case, I'll start the debate by directing a question to one of the candidates. That candidate will have 60 seconds to respond to the question on his own, and then we'll open it up to several minutes of debate from all the candidates. At the end of that debate, we'll go back to the candidate to whom the question was directed, and he'll have 30 seconds to wrap up on that topic. We'll move through a number of different topics that way, and then we'll have closing statements, and we'll do those in the reverse order of the opening statements. The candidates have not seen the questions in advance. They'll be hearing them for the first time when I ask them. So let's introduce the candidates who are running in the riding of Ottawa South. First, the Libertarian candidate, Damien Wilson. The Liberal candidate is David McGuinty. Representing the NDP is George Brown. The Conservative candidate is Dev Balkissoon. John Redins is the Green Party candidate. Al Gullon is representing the Progressive Canadians, and the Communist candidate is Larry Wasslen. So each candidate will get 1 minute for an opening statement, and we'll start with Damien Wilson, the Libertarian Party candidate. Go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Damien Wilson, and I ran in this election because I feel the young people are unrepresented. The promises that us candidates make are going to be the responsibility of paying for the promises that are made in this election falls to young people. And young people are facing a challenging economy, and we need to make sure they have the opportunities are there. By ensuring those opportunities are there, we'll be able to better take care of seniors. There is a massive amount of unfunded liabilities that the government failed to pre-fund, so this puts seniors at risk because we don't want voters to decide not to take care of those commitments that our previous government have made. Warfare is the single greatest threat to humanity's future. I believe that by getting us out of the wars in the Middle East, we can strengthen our future by pursuing a foreign policy of peace, diplomacy, and justice at home. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is David McGuinty, the Liberal Party candidate. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm David McGuinty, your Liberal Party candidate here in Ottawa South, and your sitting MP for the last 11 years. It's been an enormous privilege to serve you and serve all of Ottawa South residents over that time. In fact, my office has had the great privilege of assisting over 25,000 individuals and families on matters ranging from immigration to pension issues, tax problems, small business development loans, grievances in the public service, and beyond. It's been a real honor to serve you. This election is an important one for us as a country and as a riding. It really is about whether or not we're going to come together and continue to build a Canada which is inclusive and that looks after, in particular, our members of the middle class. We have a fully costed plan to get us there. We have a very strong team across the country. I look forward to debating more of the issues throughout this 1 hour debate here today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is George Brown, the NDP candidate. Go ahead.
My name is George Brown. I'm the NDP candidate for Ottawa South. As a community activist and former city councillor, I have the experience to represent you in Parliament. On every doorstep, you've been telling me that you're ready for change. It's fitting that today's debate is on National Seniors Day, a time to celebrate the efforts of seniors in building the Canada that we've all come to know and love, a caring and compassionate country. And I'm hearing from seniors that they are concerned, not just about their health care and what's going to happen to them down the road, but actually for their children and their grandchildren. We can do better. The NDP, Tom Mulcair, we have a plan, fully costed, a plan that can create jobs and build the country that we want and in which we inherited from our seniors that we're celebrating today. I ask for your support. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is Dev Balkissoon, the Conservative Party candidate. Go ahead.
Thanks for having us, Mark, today. I am Dev Balkissoon. I'm the Conservative candidate here in Ottawa South. I'm a small business owner, a former professor of finance, and a community volunteer. I care about economic and financial issues from the federal level to the kitchen table. I've had many years' experience helping families and seniors manage and improve their own financial situation. That's why I'm running for the only party that will protect the economy. Our Conservative Party has a plan to keep your taxes low, protect jobs, and increase benefits for families and seniors. As your MP, I'll fight for your priorities. A vote for anyone else is a vote for increasing your taxes, taking away your benefits, killing jobs, and wrecking the economy. I hope I can earn your vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The Green Party candidate is John Redins. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Hi, I'm John Redins, your Green candidate in Ottawa South. First of all, I would like to thank Rogers TV for providing us and to discuss the issues, and also thanks to the candidates and viewers being here. I'm a caring, compassionate person who works for fairness in our community. I have first-hand experience in navigating the challenges of our healthcare system. That means I understand the challenges faced by young families, new Canadians, and seniors in Ottawa South. I feel that two issues are important to me as to repeal Bill C-51, a bad piece of legislation, and to protect our seniors through our healthcare system and treat them with dignity. Once again, I'm John Redins of the Green Party. Please join me, vote on October 19. Let's build a Canada that works together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The Progressive Canadian candidate is Al Gullon. You're next. You have 1 minute.
Hello, my name is Al Gullon. The Progressive Canadian Party is following the policies and the constitution of the Progressive Conservative Party, whom your parents probably well knew. In fact, I personally downloaded from the PCPC website everything that was downloadable, but specifically the Constitution and the policy book. Personally, as a Cold War veteran in the late 60s, I spent 4 years in Europe, and I am quite concerned about the use of lump sum payments to veterans instead of the traditional pensions.
Okay, thank you. Finally, the opening statement from Larry Wasslen, the Communist Party candidate. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Larry Wasslen, and I am your Communist Party candidate in Ottawa South. Let me first acknowledge that this election, that this debate, is taking place on unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory. Let me also thank Rogers for having all candidates participate in this debate. The economy is, of course, a critical issue in this campaign. On the one hand, the Conservative Party has made it easier for the 1%, the ruling class, if you will, to get richer and richer, while working people struggle every day to make ends meet. As workers, our task is to unite and contribute our energy, our determination, and our organizational skills to force the Harper regime out of office and to reverse the big business war and austerity agenda. From now until Election Day and beyond, the Communist Party of Canada will stand shoulder to shoulder with you to put people's needs before corporate greed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to all the candidates for your opening statements. We're going to now move to a series of debates on the important topics in Ottawa South and across the country. I'll start with a question to Damien Wilson, the Libertarian candidate. Let's talk about energy policy. There is a lot of concern whenever anybody talks about pipelines bringing energy across the country. But what are the alternatives if we're not to use pipelines? How can we get oil, natural gas across the country? If we're not using pipelines, what approach should we be taking?
So the Libertarian Party, we don't stand against any particular industry, but we also don't subsidize any industry either. We believe that industry should compete on their own feet. That means that we're not going to place arbitrary regulations against certain types of resource procurement. And as far as environmental issues are concerned, we would prefer that victims of pollution and personal injury seek those damages in a fair trial. By regulating industries out of into obsolescence, we are making it harder for Canadians like myself and other people in my riding to make a good income, to escape, jobs that don't provide a good wage. And so we, under the Libertarian Party, do not oppose projects on principle. We believe that every individual should be allowed to make a good earning regardless of what industry they're in. Thank you.
Okay, it's open to everyone now on this topic.
You should have the first.
Well, I know the Green Party is totally against oil, any type of oil subsidies. We also against the transportation of bitumen across this country. It's a hazard, and we feel it should be, if we want to produce anything, it has to be done to support the local economy. We're totally against Energy East, and right now the province of Ontario has agreed that it's a bad pipeline, but we still have other pipelines that are up on the map, and we haven't got a clear picture of where the NDP stands on it. They say they stand up for the environment, but they're not against pipelines. One of the Kinder Martin project is in BC. We still haven't got an answer from your leader, yes or no. Is he in favor of stopping that pipeline or not?
So I'm happy to weigh in on this. First of all, unlike the Liberals and the Conservatives, we don't support the Keystone pipeline. If there's going to be a pipeline, and that's an if, we support Canada Energy East because jobs are going to stay in Canada and the processing is going to be in Canada. But I say if there's going to be a pipeline because we have just announced, as of today, a major energy retrofit program. Over 50,000 homes. We are going to invest in the renewable energy sector. I'm involved with a local renewable energy co-op as part of my job. And we know that in conservation, we can create thousands and thousands of jobs and reduce the need for energy. So if there is going to be a pipeline, we support absolutely Energy East. But we believe that there's a lot of alternatives. As well, we're investing in the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Green Fund, and in green infrastructure, transit, etc. Okay.
I'd like to jump in if I could. I think it's very important for us to look to the future on this question, because these fossil fuels are not only destructive to the environment, but this is a short-term solution, more and more pipelines. I think we have to invest very heavily in green jobs, green technology. This is something that the government can get behind, that our universities and scientists can get behind. We have the brain power to sort this out. Germany is an excellent example of how they have moved away from fossil fuels and towards the future energy, the green energy. So the Communist Party says absolutely no to these pipelines. Thank you.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
anyone who wants to jump
I'd like to address a few things. I'm very happy to hear that the NDP are planning on reinstating the very programs that the Liberal Party of Canada had in place up until 2006, when Mr. Harper came to office and did away with a number of things, including, for example, the eco-energy retrofit program for Canadian homes. He did away with the renewable power production incentive, did away with the wind power production incentive, did away with the National Atmospheric Research Centre for Climate Change, dismantled the commercial retrofit program for making our commercial properties more energy efficient, and more. The future is now all about becoming the cleanest economy, the most efficient economy in the world. Everyone knows this. The Chinese know this. The Americans know this. The only government that's not running in this race is this Conservative government. The cuts to environment, the cuts to energy efficiency have been dramatic. In all of Mr. Harper's time in office, he has not managed to build a single pipeline. It is important for us to get our product to market. It's also important for us to make sure that we keep our environmental standards very high, because this has a bearing on the acceptability of our fossil fuels and other natural resources in markets outside of Canada.
I was, Al Gullon, I was for a dozen years head of motor vehicle emission control for Environment Canada. And I personally believe that the major role for governments in the energy area is to seek energy efficiency. For instance, like the US has got the motor vehicle fuel consumption standards. My experience in that dozen years in motor vehicle emission control is that as the automotive engineers, of which I am one, gained more experience with what the US was doing in that area and Canada following, they actually produced more efficient engines than we were using before emission controls came in.
So I think climate change is a very important issue and one that we must all take seriously. Just for the record, we're the first government in Canadian history to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
I'm sorry you didn't. There was a recession at that time.
We must also recognize that Canada's economy is tied to responsible resource development. A healthy environment and a strong economy go hand in hand.
The problem, Mark, that we're facing now is that we have no climate change plan in Canada. We've been looking for a climate change plan now for 9 years. What we have instead is a government that's lurching and jumping from ice floe to ice floe, trying to masquerade over the fact they have no plan. This is the most important issue facing the planet. We have to start thinking about our natural security going forward. We've had a plan now in place for years that we proposed to the government. There have been enormous cuts. The government is talking about a sector-by-sector approach. However, it has still not regulated the oil and gas sector, the fossil fuel industries, which it promised to do, by the way, 7 years ago. So there is a real way forward here, which is to make sure that our economy and our environment move together. We improve on both fronts. There are ways to do this, which is why 1/3 of our infrastructure expenditures going forward will be for green infrastructure, to help make Canada a leader in the world in terms of the most efficient, the cleanest economy in the world. That is the race that we're embroiled in, and that's the race we believe we can win.
So the Liberals and the NDP would impose billions of dollars in carbon taxes that will raise the price of everything and kill jobs.
That's
We'll have
not
to stop
different
there.
than the PR department.
Let's go back to Damien Wilson. You've got the final 30 seconds on this.
So my vision for a green, prosperous future is one with waste-to-energy programs to get rid of landfills, one with nuclear and hydro. We don't need to subsidize these industries. These industries can stand on their own 2 feet without government intervention like wind and solar that cost you more in electricity rates. I live in Ontario. My parents live in Ontario. My grandparents live in Ontario. I am frustrated to see their hydro rates going up, and I believe that through having a commitment to abundant, cheap energy, we can have a better economy.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Liberal candidate David McGuinty. Let's talk about jobs, and specifically, your party's been talking about creating jobs by investing, but if you're going to increase the cost to employers of things like employment insurance and the Canada Pension Plan, there are business organizations that say it means a lot of businesses will hire fewer people. So are those payroll taxes going to kill jobs in the economy?
Well, thank you for the question, Mark. First of all, we're not going to increase employment insurance. We're going to reduce employment insurance contributions. We're simply not going to abide by the unaffordable proposal put forward by Mr. Harper's party. Secondly, we don't consider Canada Pension Plan contributions a payroll tax. We know, and we should all know now at this podium, having knocked on so many doors, that pensions and income security is a huge concern for a lot of Canadians today, not just our seniors, but our folks in the middle class who are struggling to get by and to save for the future. That's why within 100 days of forming government, we will sit down with the provinces and we will cooperate on an expanded Canada Pension Plan. We're also committed to investing twice as much in infrastructure going forward over the next 10 years, because our growth has flatlined under Mr. Harper for the past 9 years. The Americans are growing at 3.6% this year. We'll be lucky if we hit 1%.
Okay, it's open to everyone now, and don't wait for me to call on you. Just jump in whenever there's an opening. Go ahead.
Once again, the governments don't really have a role in creating jobs. They do and should be monitoring that the private sector does not commit environmental or energy efficiency indecencies in the process. So the government should monitor, and another thing they have to monitor, of course, is the setting up of monopolies within the private sector. That is anti-progress as well.
See, I like his answer over there. One of the things I want to talk about is our party offers a solution where we raise the personal exemption, because we shouldn't be taxing Canadians who are in the working poor. And I believe that's the best way that we can help low-income Canadians, instead of taxing them and having programs that simply fail to deliver results for individuals. In a lot of these government programs, individuals are the ones who are left between the cracks. Veterans, seniors with disabilities, all sorts of people who believe these programs will help them. But since the deputy ministers have an incentive to ignore the problems and brag about their new program and what they're doing, the individuals get left behind. And that's why I believe communities should be taking a leading role and not the federal government.
So, as the question focused on jobs, the NDP have a very specific platform to create jobs. We are going to reduce the small business tax from 11 to 9%. Small businesses create 78% of the jobs in this economy. We're going to have an innovation tax credit for manufacturing. We're going to put $1.3 billion into transit and another $1.5 billion into long-term stable funding to cities, which are going to create, it's an estimate of 54,000 jobs. We have a plan. It's a targeted plan. The aerospace industry, the forestry sector are going to get the support they need and the investment they need to create good, long-term, stable jobs.
Well, the challenge, of course, with the plan put up by Mr. Mulcair is that the numbers simply don't add up. What we have is a situation where, as has been said, Mr. Mulcair is running on a Tommy Douglas policy platform using Stephen Harper's budget. Now, here's the problem with Stephen Harper's budget. Mr. Harper won't tell you that in the last 9 years he has increased our national debt by $151 billion. That's after the previous government reduced our national debt by $60 billion. Mr. Harper won't tell you that last year he cut back $8.7 billion in important programming, like $1 billion from Veterans Canada, like $350 million from Immigration Canada to help with the processing of our refugees, for example, by cutting back on half of the railway inspectors, for example, by cutting back on food inspectors. So we have a situation where the importance now is to invest. We need to stimulate growth in Canada. And the way to do this, the most efficient way, the economic consensus is to invest in infrastructure. That's why our plan is to work with provinces and municipalities to invest in infrastructure while we're cutting taxes for the middle class. And yes, the only party brave enough to say we're going to increase taxes by a nominal amount for those earning over $200,000 a year, the top 1% in Canadian society.
So 2 points. No, 2 points, though. I just have to respond to that. Tommy Douglas balanced 17 budgets in a row. I've got a number for David.
Except not on
David,
Stephen Harper's budget.
I have a number for you, 2%. We're the only party that's committed to not raising taxes on individuals, but to have corporations pay their fair share. A 2% rise in the corporate tax rate is going to help us pay without running three deficits of $10 billion a year. As my father used to say, you can't borrow your way out of debt.
Except you know what the corporate tax increase, a 2% increase on corporate tax, a 2% is going to cost 160,000 jobs.
Right now, when the NDP is saying that Tommy Douglas balanced the budgets. Sure, he balanced the budgets, but corporate taxes at that time were 40 or 50%. This meek and mild, tepid response of the NDP to beg the corporations for 2% more. This is really a sellout of the working class here. Yeah. Where is the Tommy Douglas plan, the full employment strategy that puts people back to work? I've been door to door throughout Ottawa South, and people are desperate for work. Not just adults, but they're adult children as well. There is an unemployment rate of 7% in Canada, and the youth unemployment rate is about triple that. And every time I go knocking door to door, people are saying, we need jobs, we need jobs. And this 2% NDP plan is a disgrace. I think workers deserve better than that.
Here's the problem, if I could, Mark. The problem is, according to the NDP, they say they're relying on Mr. Harper's numbers. The first number is they say the economy is going to grow by 2% this year. And they also are counting on $57 a barrel oil. Well, two things have happened since then. The Bank of Canada have told us we're lucky if we grow 1% this year, and oil is hovering at about $42 a barrel. The numbers are skewed. The second thing is, once you start hiking income taxes on corporate players the way is being proposed by the NDP, we know a 2% increase in corporate tax will cost the country somewhere between 130 and 160,000 jobs. That's not the way forward.
Not true.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that figure comes from Henry Mintz. Henry Mintz
actually comes from David Dodge.
It comes from David Mintz, who happens to be in the board of directors of Imperial Oil.
It comes from David Dodge.
There are other studies showing that there is no long-range effect on this. If this is so beautiful, why are corporations right now sitting on close to $600 billion in cash? Where's the trickle down?
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Where's the investment that has happened? Okay, this trickle-down business, it has not worked. We're not going to be irresponsible like the Communist Party is suggesting and hike the taxes to whatever. But we're the lowest of the G7. We want to go up into the middle. The Americans have a higher corporate tax than us, and they've got 5.2% unemployment Ours is 7.
The
Let's
American
This is a
corporate
fallacy
tax rate is
that's gonna create
39%.
jobs. Exactly.
So with a tepid increase of 2%,
It's a
where
start.
are these companies going
Okay.
to run off to?
I would like to
Okay.
Are they
point
going
out
to China?
that corporations don't pay taxes. Consumers pay corporate taxes.
Okay, Dev Balkissoon, you're next.
I just wanted to add one small thing. Through careful management, the Conservative government has lowered taxes, increased benefits for families and seniors. We'll continue to do that.
Which families?
And we will do so without
families?
raising your taxes.
Single parent?
These other parties will both raise your taxes and put us into long-term deficits.
Let me respond to that if I could, Mark. Here's the reality of Mr. Harper's approach to family support. The top 15% of Canadian families are benefiting under his plan. There's a better way to do this,
All
which is why we have a
families-
Canada Child Care benefit,
they're not.
which is going to
All
affect, which is
families
going to
should
support 9 out of
benefit
10 families.
equally
The second
from family
reality
support.
under Mr. Harper's plan is that
What's
he
fair
has,
is
he
all
has
families
actually
benefit.
trying to cut his way to growth. It's
Okay.
not working for Canada.
You get the last 30 seconds, David McGuinty, on this topic because I asked you the question.
Well, let me pick up where we left off. Our plan is
had it, didn't
to help with job creation. We're going to do a few things. One, we're going to cut taxes for the middle income earners. $44,000 to $90,000, we'll see a 7% income tax cut. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in a family benefit, a fairness plan that's going to strongly support our middle class families and going to provide much more tax-free support than the present program that's under Mr. Harper. We have all kinds of other things to say about this. I look forward to picking up on this.
Thank you. All right, next question. I'll direct it to George Brown, the NDP candidate. Let's talk about Bill C-51. The NDP opposes it. If not Bill C-51, how would you protect our country?
Well, I'd protect our country, first of all, by doing what the Intelligence Committees asked for in the first place, which was giving us more resources, frontline resources. The NDP have committed money to hire 25,000 new officers. When they came, that's what they asked for. They didn't ask for new spying powers. They didn't ask for the ability to expand the definition of security, to make it much broader than it is now. They asked for more frontline resources, and that's what we're going to do to protect Canadians. We're also going to have an international policy that gathers respect around the world. Right now, we don't have that. We went to Syria. John Baird, Paul Dewar went to Syria to talk about what was needed for that crisis, and they told us $500 million in humanitarian aid, that'll do it. What did we give them? We gave them bombing. You know, against our military advisors' advice, we bombed Libya
It's open to
and
everyone
created
now.
a failed state, and now we're bombing ISIS. We're being played by the Middle Eastern powers, and we have no business putting our young men and women in harm's way
It's
when
open
we
to
have
everyone now.
that sort of policy.
He's exactly right. I mean, one of the most frustrating things are the arming of these rebel groups who then overthrow secular dictators who, while we don't like them, it gives more power to these international jihadist movements. He's right that we need to step out of the involvement in these wars overseas. We need to, as you say, if you want to help increase stability, donate to Doctors Without Borders. Doctors Without Borders does incredibly great work for improving stability. We, under the Libertarian Party of Canada, will make sure that the government represents the citizens of Canada and not be focused on other citizens around the world. The Canadian government is for the Canadian people.
I think the question, Mark, was what is the position of the NDP with respect to C-51 and Canadian security concerns?
We're going to repeal it.
So,
Absolutely repeal
and
it.
that's
We're gonna
clear.
repeal it as
That's
well.
clear. NDP is going to repeal it, but here's the challenge. After 9/11, the NDP opposed every single security measure brought forward on the floor of the House of Commons. In fact, in the last 60 years, the NDP have supported no new security measures on the floor of the House of Commons. That's undeniable.
Why didn't you vote for it?
We
Why
voted
didn't
for
you vote against
C-51
it?
because it contains 3 or 4 essential elements. We also went to committee and proposed 20 amendments to try to improve the bill. Unfortunately, the Conservatives defeated each and every one of the 20 amendments, then turned around, took 3 or 4 of them, and put them forward and passed them themselves. We're going to fix C-51 to get the appropriate balance between security for Canadians and the protection of our civil
But you
liberties
voted for
and
it
human
anyways.
rights. So the reality is going forward, you need to choose a party and work with a
You
government
voted in favor of it.
that
Your-
will be
your
able
leader
to
said he
walk
was
between
he
both
said
of
he was
these
naive
important
of,
attributes
of
for
giving up
Canada.
our security. Your leader said on the Maclean's debate that he was naive in voting in favor of it.
And
Well, actually, let me
it's a-
respond to that if I could. You know, when you're in opposition, when you're a parliamentarian, whether you're actually a member of the government caucus or otherwise, your job is to try to improve legislation. That's
Yes.
the job. And that's exactly what
But-
we did when we
but
brought 20
it's the-
amendments.
but the
to the
It's
conservative-
also to
the-
uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Yeah.
And this was not a little policy tweak. C51 was a principle that never should have been violated. And that's the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
so-
You had 4 prime ministers, leading legal experts, who said this is a draconian bill that was not necessary.
So what's your-
and
what's
it
your
should
alternative?
not have been voted
What's
for.
your alternative, George?
Well, like we said, we're first of all, the powers that exist are adequate to do the job. And so we want to give what they
So-
ask for, frontline resources.
So then why is it, George, then why is it that our Five Eye partners, our 4 other partners, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, why is it they have given these 3 additional powers we're in support of to their security agencies, but you won't give it to the Canadian security agencies?
Because we're not the United States, and we are never going to be the United States, I hope, when it comes
What
to
about
our
Australia?
foreign policy.
What about New Zealand?
Well, I'm talking about the United States.
I'm
But
talking about our
let's-
Five
let's
Eye
get-
partners.
Let's get to reality. Your leader did not have you vote for C51 because he says it right here. He was afraid that Stephen Harper was, and this is a quote out of Huffington Post, was going to make political hay out of it. C51 was a failure of leadership on your part.
You still have an answer,
He was
George.
afraid of what was going to be said about him, that he was going to be soft on terrorism.
George, I still have
Okay.
Let's
still
talk
an-
about Bill
there's no answer.
C-51 for a second, and let's underscore a couple of points. Number one, the first party in the House of Commons to oppose this draconian anti-democratic bill was the Green Party. And I take my hat off to Elizabeth May. She had the courage to stand up. Mr. Mulcair and the NDP stood out on Parliament Hill and waited for the wind to blow one way or another. But as the Canadian population became more and more aware of what was in Bill C-51, eventually the NDP decided, oh, we better take this up. We better oppose this. So they're not standing on here on some kind of principle opposition to the anti-democratic Bill C-51. They're not standing up in principle to oppose secret trials and all these other things that go in with that. So let's be really clear.
How do you know what we're standing on?
Bill C-51
We voted
is
against
just
it.
Another
We voted
February
against it. That's our
22nd,
stand.
February 22nd, he was on global TV and saying that he won't repeal it if he was in power.
How do you vote? How do you vote?
How do you vote?
How do you vote?
Because
He voted against it.
Let me also
Eventually.
say,
Maybe
Eventually,
Dev-
yeah,
Okay,
eventually.
Dev Balkissoon, you've been trying to get in here. Go ahead.
Let me just make my little statement on C-51. This new law is required because the international terrorist movement has declared war on
I can
Canada.
get killed by a moose here
Canadians
in
are
Canada.
being targeted by terrorists simply because they hate our society and the values it
true.
represents.
That's a
true.
racist statement.
We reject the argument that every time we talk about security, our freedoms are threatened. Canadians understand that their freedom and security go hand in hand, and Canadians expect us to protect both.
the problem is
Well,
that
we
And
were well known as
there are
peacekeepers.
safeguards in this
No.
legislation to
No,
do
there isn't.
exactly
No, the
that.
problem
the
is-
fundamental fact
You're-
is that
you're
our
attacking-
police
you're
and
attacking the labor
national
movement, a part of this
security
bill,
agencies
on the
are
right
working
to
to protect
protest.
our,
On the right to
our
protest.
rights and our freedom. And it's jihadi
The right to
terrorists
protest.
who endanger our security
A
and
right
who would
to
take away
protest.
our
Okay.
freedoms.
One at
the
a time,
threat to Canadians is not CSIS. The threat to Canadians is ISIS.
the problem here is that the Conservatives did not achieve the balance that
Threat of
Canadians
Stephen Harper.
expect.
Okay, one at a time.
They did not achieve the balance. That's why we have put forward 20 amendments to improve the bill and amend the legislation. Chief among them is to make sure that we have political oversight of the work of our security agencies. Mr. Harper says he doesn't think that elected parliamentarians should be able to do so. That is the practice in virtually all other countries.
Mr. McKay said there
And we
was
think this is an important approach to be taking to make sure that security agencies are reporting back to Parliament, the House of the People, to make sure that that balance between the Charter and our civil liberties is matched
Okay.
with the powers that we're
Damien
giving our
Wilson has
agencies
been trying to get
to
through.
do their jobs.
Go ahead, Damien Wilson.
With respect, David McGuinty, I really need to stress that young people aren't buying it. We're not buying that you can fiddle the right balance between security and freedom. The fact is, if you have more freedom, you will have more security. If you have more association in your communities so that people understand and know each other, they are more likely to alert the police to these problem people. One Muslim community was very adamant and stood up and told the RCMP of an incoming terrorist attack. Bill C-51 does not help that. Bill C-51 erodes your civil liberties and throws a lot of them out with the bathwater.
Judicial
we'll have to
oversight
stop there.
is
I'm
built
sorry.
into this bill. We
We're gonna
believe that
stop right
judges,
there.
not
That's the end
politicians,
of our
are the best
discussion on
place
that,
to oversee
on that
these
topic.
active files.
Please stop. Thank you. George Brown, you get the last 30 seconds on this. Thank you.
So we can get into the details, and there are plenty written on that. What bothers me is people know. People are not stupid. And I've had extensive outreach into the Muslim community, and they are hurt. And they are very hurt. They expected this from Mr. Harper. They did not expect this from the Liberals. And it's not just the Muslim community, although they certainly feel scapegoated. We have indigenous activists, environmentalists, all are being tainted with the definition. This should never have been passed.
Okay, next question is for Dev Balkissoon, the Conservative candidate. I want to talk about the federal public service. There has been a lot of concern, and I'm sure I've heard from candidates that they're hearing it at the door about this government's relationship with the federal public service. There have been scientists who are saying they've been muzzled. There have been workplace experts who have been saying it's now a toxic work environment for employees. There have been issues around taking away benefits like sick leave. So if your government's re-elected, what would you do to rebuild your relationship with the Canadian public service, including the public servants here in Ottawa?
Thank you for that question. I have specific answers for the sick leave, and hopefully we'll get to the science as well. So our Conservative government has been very proud of the good work done by Canada's public servants, and as we navigate the global economic recession, cut taxes on families and job-creating businesses, and balance the budget. However, our opponents have been making misleading statements about matters of concern to the public service. Today, we released an open letter from Prime Minister Stephen Harper to members of the public service to set the record straight on sick leave. Our government is working to improve sick leave plan for the public service. The current sick leave system leaves some public servants without adequate coverage. Our government wants to fill those gaps to deliver seamless support. Rumors that public servants who have accumulated 6 days will have to start over entirely are not true and have never been true. And discussions are ongoing about how to best integrate banked 6 days into any new plan.
Okay, it's open to everyone now on this topic. Go ahead.
The relationship between a government and Canada's public servants has never been at a lower moment in history, in my view. True. Mr. Harper has singled out the public service through himself and Tony Clement, picking on public servants, trying to message out to the Canadian people that they are not professional, that they are overpaid, overbenefited, you name it. The problem with that is, instead of tearing down our good public servants, without whom no government can do good work, Mr. Harper should have been building up others in Canadian society, for example, by looking at the reality of expanding the Canada Pension Plan, so people can retire independently and with dignity. I want to just cite one example of the way Mr. Harper's government has acted. Several years ago, a 21-year-old employee at Environment Canada was arrested and led away in handcuffs because Mr. Harper's government alleged that this individual had leaked sensitive materials as a person who was making clippings from newspapers at Environment Canada. That turned out to be a complete falsehood. The young man was never charged, but it was a message sent by Mr. Harper and his team, which is to intimidate public servants. That's why good people like the former head of Stats Canada left. Good people like the Parliamentary Budget Officer left. Linda Keane, the head of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Council, was fired at 11 p.m. at night at home because she did her job by speaking truth to power. Look, there is a much better way to proceed to make sure that our public servants work hand in glove with a responsible government, with evidence-based decision-making, which is why we're going to reverse so many of these draconian approaches brought by Mr. Harper.
So, you know, public servants, and I've been hearing from a lot of them at the doors, they are getting really tired of what I would call public servant ping pong. being batted back and forth between the Conservatives and the Liberals. The Liberals decimated in the mid-90s the public service the same way that Mr. Harper has done as far as job cuts. Right now we're looking at a $6.4 or $6.5 billion cut that Mr. Trudeau has said is going to be needed. John McCallum is saying everything's on the table. He's talking his strategic operating reviews. The last time John McCallum was at the table was in the 1990s, and 20% of the public service was cut. We're saying no more cuts. We've already are seeing the effects across the country. We are going to implement the key recommendation of the Gomery inquiry into the Liberal sponsorship scandal concerning a code of conduct for ministers. We're going to respect collective bargaining for real, and we're going to protect public service whistleblowers from retaliation. We are going to restore the relationship that the two other parties have destroyed with our public service.
I'm glad we have another candidate who's willing to stand up for the rights of whistleblowers, because I have family members in the public service. I've door knocked and met people in the public service, and one of their most common complaints I hear is this ping pong, as he says, between the Conservatives and the Liberals. The Liberals have a huge history of making incredibly great promises, but unfortunately, if you look at here in Ontario, the teachers aren't happy, the parents aren't happy, the students are unhappy. I'm not going to make any guarantees about what the way the Canada is going to be like. But I can guarantee you that if I was in office, I would make sure the public sector workers are given a fair commitment to the promises that have been made to them, and that we would cut down on huge bureaucratic salaries, such as the one at the CEO of Canada Post, which is over $500,000 a year. And he's delivering Canadians less postage at a higher cost. I could give you that advice for far less.
I spent 23 years as a public servant in Environment Canada, technical person, and previous to that, a dozen years as a transport officer in the Canadian Armed Forces. Now, I particularly remember an incident in discussing what kind of emission standards vehicle emission standards that Canada should have relative to the U.S. And I remember sitting in the minister's office arguing that Canada would be financially better off and have lower emissions if we simply adopted the U.S. standards, but the politician, I wasn't actually talking to the minister, but the senior deputy minister insisted on Canadian emission standards. Thank God General Motors took over and ran with vehicles that would meet in Canada, that would meet the American standards.
Okay, Larry Wasslen.
Yes, thank you very much. Let's be really clear about this. Public sector workers have been under attack by the Harper regime for 9 years now, and it should be very clear to everyone that it's not just public sector workers that the Harper regime hates, it's all workers. So one of the things that we have to have is a workers' bill of rights that respects collective bargaining, that puts higher wages, better benefits, and full-time work clearly on the table. One of the things that is critical in public sector workers is cutting the cutbacks to public assets. For example, what the Liberals are doing right now in selling off hydro. We have to reverse these kinds of cuts, enhance take back Petro-Canada, take back Air Canada, and we need to build the public sector, not slash it.
Here are three things that we're going to do.
Sorry, John Redins, you had your hand up. Sorry.
There's one example this week of a conflict of interest. A former candidate from 2011 being investigated of his dealings in the Prime Minister's office. That's one prime example. They're being stonewalled every chance to investigate.
Okay, we'll have to stop there, but Dev Balkissoon, I asked you the question, so you get the final 30 seconds on this.
Oh, great. Thank you. I can come back around because you did ask something about muzzling of scientists, so let me just say this. Ministers are the primary spokespersons for government departments. However, on science and specifically, Canada is ranked #1 in the G7 for our support for scientific research and development in colleges, universities, and other research institutes. Canadian federal departments and agencies produce over 4,000 scientific publications per year.
Okay.
We're one of the leaders in publication of peer-reviewed scientific journals in the world.
That's time.
That's right.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next question, which I'll direct to John Redins, who is the Green Party candidate. I want to talk about local issues like transit and also the federal government's relationship with the City of Ottawa through the National Capital Commission and through funding for infrastructure. But I'll start with a specific question. So when we get to the debate, everything's fair game in this area. The specific question is, should the federal government support financially a transit link to the Ottawa airport?
Very good question. Yesterday, the leader of the Green Party answered the questions that the Ottawa mayor asked, and one of them was asking for $166 million for the airport, and she said absolutely yes. She also will support the LRT expansion that was already been promised. The working relationship with the NCC we need somebody there. I can say an event happened in Ottawa South this past May, and they decided to do a road the repair on the bridge at the Rideau Canal, and this event was going on at Hogsback, and they had to transfer the equipment back and forth across this bridge, and it seems like nobody's talking to anybody with the city to coordinate these types of activities.
Okay, it's open to everyone, and again, it doesn't just have to be about that specific issue, but
It's
So
important to understand.
as a former city councillor, 9 years, I understand the importance of transit and municipal infrastructure. So as I've said before, we've made a long-term commitment, 1 cent from the gas tax, in addition, forever. Not sort of this boom and bust business of, borrowing for 3 years and then somehow we know what's going to happen. The cuts come. Long-term stable funding for transit. I understand the local issues. I was on the O-Train Expansion Advisory Committee, which just reported and actually worked out that link to the airport, as well as the Airport Parkway expansions. On the NCC, absolutely. I mean, the NDP has tabled legislation in the past, private members bill, to get the mayors, the mayor of Gatineau and the mayor of Ottawa, on the board of the NCC. And we're absolutely committed to that.
If I could, Mark, I think the relationship between the federal government and the City of Ottawa has been strained at best. I was very pleased years ago to work to achieve the $600 million contribution from the federal government at the time for the first phase of light rail. I've been in regular contact with the airport authority to help encourage them to make a contribution, which I'm hearing they're very much willing to do, to help with this additional $155 million link from phase 2 to the airport. That would be the right thing to do, building on the experience in Vancouver and Toronto. We are the capital of a G8 economy, after all. I would say, however, when it comes to relationships, for example, between this Conservative government and the NCC, this has been a perfect example of what Canadians don't want. And the most extreme example more recently has been the question of a monument for victims of communism. Very unfortunately, on the way out the door, the former regional minister here, Baird, working with Minister Kenny, and now working with Mr. Poilievre, have actually forced this decision on the NCC. The city's not in favor, the citizens are not in favor, the Supreme Court's not in favor, the architects are not in favor, the planners and designers are not in favor. In fact, the NCC itself was not in favor. So we have a situation where we have to rethink our relationship with the important National Capital Commission, who manage so much of Canada's capital for all Canadians. This question of making sure we take into account the City of Ottawa and the City of Gatineau's legitimate interests is an important one. One thing we will stop is the kind of partisan appointments that have flowed into the NCC on Mr. Harper's watch.
Well, that's good. And to add to the list of Ottawa citizens who oppose the Victims Against Communism Memorial, I find it incredibly ironic that we're funding a memorial through taxes to raise awareness about communism. I respectfully disagree with the opinions of communism. I don't need a memorial to remind me about its damaging policy choices. On the greater question of infrastructure, it's a real sign of the times that the municipal and provincial governments are going to shake down federal taxpayers for this money. If Jim Watson wants a more improved transit system, he should be willing to face his residents and say, I need to do this, I need to raise your taxes to do it, or we should simply raise it through the communities so that local communities are funding their own infrastructure rather than shaking down federal taxpayers.
I really have to have
I,
one word on
I
the victims of
strongly,
communism.
I strongly support the Phase 2 of the LRT project. The Conservative government has already pledged $1 billion in funding for this project. These funds are available through the Building Canada plan, the longest and largest infrastructure plan in Canadian history. David McGuinty voted against it. In my recent meeting with Mayor Watson, I emphasized the importance of ensuring any light rail project that runs through Ottawa South will have several stops in Ottawa South. As your elected MP, I will continue to support this important project. On the victims of communism, the Tribute to Liberty is a charitable organization. They have requested that site, and we are accommodating that request, something that your leader has supported, David McGuinty.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
not
we're
quite
gonna have
true,
to
but
stop there,
that's
but
fine.
I'm going to go back to John Redins. You get the final 30 seconds on this.
Infrastructure is required everywhere. In Montreal, we have bridges closing. What the Green Party is proposing is a Council of the Canadian Government, which is the level of federal, provincial, and municipal of joint partnership, plus also the First Nations people. And it's a model that Australia, and it works real well. We promise that with 1% of all the GST will go into infrastructure. That's including housing as well.
Okay, thank you. That's it for the series of debates. We're going to move right to the closing statements now. Again, we'll do those in the reverse order of the opening statements. So we'll start with the Communist Party candidate, Larry Wasslen. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
For the past decade, you have suffered under the unrelenting attacks of the Harper regime. Capitalist corruption, lies, electoral fraud, job losses, war abroad, and austerity at home. The other big business party, the Liberals, campaign from the left, but they govern from the right. When the crunch comes, the fancy velvet glove covering the right fist will come off. For many, the total surrender of the Mulcair NDP to the corporate agenda is a painful reminder that the ruling class has more than two political parties to do its bidding. The Communist Party of Canada will never surrender to the bosses, the landlords, the ruling class. We stand proudly for a better Canada, an independent Canada of peace and disarmament, a Canada with the working class in charge. Take a second look at the working class program of your Communist Party. Together we can move Canada to the left. Workers of all countries
Thank
unite.
you.
We have nothing
That's
to
your
lose
time.
but our
Thank
change.
you. Al Gullon, the Progressive Canadian candidate, you're next.
Yes, on the matter of policy, I mentioned earlier that I had downloaded the policy book for the Progressive Conservative Party. And to my surprise, all I needed to, on a current issue was to take a keyword, do a search through the book on that keyword, and I almost always come up with a very realistic policy for a current issue, even though that policy book was put together in 2002.
Okay, thank you. John Redins.
Some topics that we haven't discussed yet are veterans, the cuts on veterans, health care for seniors, the aged population. We got to start looking at that. Child care spots, we have to accommodate our families to save costs. Seniors is a big issue. The aging population is growing, and education affordability. We have to look at that. We're a Canada that works together. Vote for the Green Party, October 19th.
Okay, thank you. Dev Balkissoon, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. So our government has a low tax plan for jobs and growth that balances the national budget while putting more money in the pockets of Canadian families. We do this while protecting Canadian values here at home and on the international stage. A vote for anyone else is a vote for Justin Trudeau and his plan to raise taxes, run deficits, and weaken the laws that we have put in place to make Canada a safer place. I hope I can earn your vote. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you. George Brown, the NDP candidate, you're next.
Well, it's fitting I'm actually in between the Liberal and the Conservative candidate because there are two parties here that voted for Bill C-51, have both taken their turn at kicking the public service when they're down, both support Keystone, and both support an austerity agenda. And they actually both run deficits. Tom Mulcair and the NDP have put forward a plan that is responsible. It involves a slight increase to the corporate tax rate. These two parties will not do that. They want ordinary Canadians, middle-class Canadians, to pay for their promises. Many promises of which, of course, get broken. So whether it is our $15 a day childcare, our investments in infrastructure, our repeal of C-51, you know that Tom Mulcair can be trusted, and that Tom Mulcair and the NDP have got a platform that will rebuild the country that we have come to know, the country that I remember growing up, and I wish I want to serve again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. David McGuinty, the Liberal Party candidate, you're next.
Well, thanks very much for tuning into this important debate, and thank you to all my colleagues who are here today. Thanks to Rogers for hosting it. First of all, I want to remind people that we are in a situation where Canada's seen the lowest growth in 80 years. It's time for us to invest in our economy because our growth has flatlined. That's why we're going to do three things. First, we're going to make the largest investments in infrastructure in Canadian history, $160 billion over 10 years in a fully costed plan. We're going to do so working with the provinces and municipalities, not from on high, but from bottom up. Secondly, we're going to cut taxes for the middle class, a 7% tax cut. We're going to increase taxes for the top 1%. And thirdly, we're going to bring in a family care plan, a fairness plan, that will actually provide a Canada Child benefit that is more generous and more supportive for our middle class families. These things together will stimulate the growth we need to kickstart Canada's economic growth, create jobs, lower unemployment, and be able to afford the other measures that are in our platform. Thank you very much for watching today.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Damien Wilson, the Libertarian candidate. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this debate. My name is Damien Wilson, and I joined the Libertarian Party so that we could end the gambling of taxpayer money on special interest projects that may or may not pan out. What I am offering Canadians in the Ottawa South riding is a commitment to peace, diplomacy, and justice, legalizing marijuana so that nonviolent individuals don't face jail time. It's really unfortunate that our current government has a cynically authoritarian approach to criminal justice and is not taking care of our veterans. All the money we use in foreign interventions could be used directly to taking care of our veterans. And I believe that would be a far better way for the federal government to serve Canadians. We can have a stronger Canada. And I do plan on running provincially so that we can have a better province in Ontario. But right now, I want to see us outside of the wars so that we can have more peace and prosperity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all the candidates for participating in the debate for the riding of Ottawa South, and I'll remind you that Election Day is on October 19th. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on the local campaign.